Can you explain to me about, the different types of denial or different types of claims that are out there, and specifically what type we're going to talk about today?
Well, there's all kinds of claims. People buy insurance. We all seem to buy a lot of insurance. I do. I've got medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, prescription insurance, property casualty, home insurance. We're all insured. It all takes some form of getting to understand it, and some of it you could consider could be the same. But when it comes to medical claims, they take a little bit different tact than if the homeowner's policy isn't going to cover your drain that backed up and flooded your basement. You want to narrow in on medical today and what we can accomplish in beginning to understand what has to be done. Are you tired of having your insurance claims denied? Do you want to know how to get the payouts you deserve? You're in the right place. Each week, me and my guests are dedicated to empowering you with the knowledge you need to navigate the complex world of insurance claim denials. With over 50 years in the claims game myself, I'll make sure you are guided through writing compelling claims appeals, understanding your insurance plans, navigating healthcare laws, and filing effective insurance complaints. Join me, Mary Covington, on today's episode as I teach you to simplify the intricate world of insurance while helping you confidently secure your claims, relieve your stress, and ease the financial burden of unpaid claims. Now, let's fix those claims. And hi, everyone. I am Mary Covington, the insurance lady.
Today, we're going to talk about how to fight a healthcare claim or medical claim denial. Effectively, you want to challenge the insurance denial and secure the coverage for yourself or your family. And let's talk about, Mary, why that is important. How is that impacting you when someone gets a medical denial? Tell me a little bit about what happens to that person when they receive it.
Well, depending on the amount of the claim, you may be a little more panicked at getting a $25,000 denial versus, a $25 denial for a prescription. So I think the impact is basically the same. It's sort of everyone's like, oh goodness, what do I do? How do I fight this? Is there something I can do? And at that point, you may be a little more seasoned than others, but you really need to sometimes just sort of get yourself prepared to do a little bit of investigating and trying to work through it and probably try not to panic too much.
Yeah, because usually when we're talking to them, a lot of people they've been in some kind of crisis, they've been through some kind of medical procedure. These bills start coming in, and oh my gosh, it's like, what do I do? How do I handle this? And, so this topic is very important because a lot of people tend to just not want to deal with it. But if you have some knowledge, like we're going to share today, it should make it a little bit easier to get started, to understand what you need to do to fight that medical claim. So we did want to touch a point on, can you explain to me about, the different types of denial or different types of claims that are out there, and specifically what type we're going to talk about today?
Well, there's all kinds of claims. People buy insurance. We all seem to buy a lot of insurance. I do. I've got medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, prescription insurance, property casualty, home insurance. We're all insured. And it all takes some form of getting to understand it. And some of it you could consider could be the same. But when it comes to medical claims, they take a little bit different tact than if the homeowner's policy isn't going to cover your drain that, backed up and flooded your basement. So you want to narrow in on medical today and what we can accomplish in beginning to understand what has to be done. And we're just at the beginning stages at this point of what needs to be done to investigate and move forward with an appeal of the claim.
So we do need to understand the reasons for the denial, right? So you get something in the mail and you find out it's not getting paid. And, what are the steps to understanding what type of a reason of denial there is?
Well, as we all know, things have been changing in the industry. We used to get denials in the mail, and we still do. So, for a medical necessity denial where they say, oh, your surgery wasn't medically necessary, you're probably going to get a letter. Now, you're also on many claims, you're going to have an EOB. Maybe you get a notice from your insurance company via email that there is a notice of a claim on your portal. So, you always want to make sure you have your access to your portal to go on there and look at claims. You can usually pull them up. You get each family members on there, and then you can go in and look at the claims. You probably want to do that if you get a statement in the mail from the doctor that you owe money. You probably want to take that and go to the web portal and look up the doctor on the web portal for your, if it's you or your husband or your children, you want to look up that claim and see if it's sitting on the portal. And then you want to see the doctor says you owe this, and the portal says it was denied. So now you've got a denial in hand, whether it's coming from a letter or whether it's coming from a notice of a claim or what we call an EOB, an explanation of benefits. Again, insurance companies call those notices all different things: payment notice, remittance advice notice. I mean, so explanation of benefit, remittance, they do a bunch of different names. So you want to kind of be prepared that it's not always going to be an EOB. EOB is the generalized term or acronym that we use in the industry when we're looking at a claim that was processed through the computer. If you get a letter, that means someone at the insurance company held it in their hand and looked at it and put a denial into the system. So it's generally not computer generated. So a letter is different than an EOB or whatever the insurance company wants to call it. So, and there's a balance. You're getting a statement in the mail, and then you're going to look to see what the insurance company, why you have a balance on this bill. And I just got a bill. I paid a bill the other day to my orthopedics. I had my ankle fracture. And so I got this bill and I paid it. It was $281 and some odd cents. So I checked my EOB and I owed it. Okay. So I wrote a check. So then the other day I get another notice from the doctor on a text telling me I owe them more money. And I'm just like, I just sent you $281. So I haven't gone to pull it up yet on my text, but I'm going to wait for just a little while to see if I get another bill or if it was the same bill at this point, because my ankle fracture was in March. And so I thought I'm all done. It's now September. So I shouldn't be getting any more bills. So I keep waiting, which tells me the insurance company has been very slow to pay the claims. So I'm going to wait. But that's me because I always like to give enough time for things to percolate. Claim percolating.
Yeah, claim percolating. So we're going to percolate. The claims are coming out and they're denied. So let's talk about the various different reasons for denial.
Oh boy. In my business, I've captured that there are generally can be up to 52 different reasons that insurance companies deny claims.
52?
It's a lot of reasons.
Has it always been 52 or is it
About 52.
okay?
Occasionally we throw in a new one because the insurance companies come up with a new reason to deny. So you're going to have one of those 52 probably, but the most common ones are medical necessity. They don't believe the service you had was medical necessity. And you'll generally get a letter for those. Occasionally that'll be on an EOB. But and then the other kind are coverage denials, and that's where most of them come into. Medical necessity can be custodial care, experimental, investigational, unproven. And then the coverage ones are over in another bucket. And those can be coding problems. The service isn't covered. The provider doesn't meet the definition in the plan. The provider's not in network. Your services were out of network. We don't cover out of network.
Yeah.
You didn't pre authorize, so there's all of these different types of denial reasons. And that's the beginning of the start of beginning to understand what the problem is.
And it's going to be stated somewhere, right?
It
On your
will be. It will be
EOB
stated.
letter that you get.
Correct. The letter will have a paragraph that sort of explains it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to read it. And sometimes it's a little cryptic. So you want to read it a few times because I have employees and sometimes they'll miss it. They'll bypass a sentence that is very important. So sometimes I get a highlighter and I highlight the areas that I believe are the denial reasons, and they're tricky insurance companies. They sometimes want to do 2 or 3 denial reasons in one letter, and you're like, "Oh." But you just wanna make sure you're understanding it because you gotta get that figured out first. And then if it's on an EOB, as you're looking at your EOB, which are mostly landscaped looking, again, it'll have a remark code next to the denial column or somewhere on that string that's going across the EOB, and it'll have a number. And at the end of the EOB, there should be where they list the remarks or the denial reasons. And so you want to check the number because you could have several claims on there. So you want to just zero in on the one that denied, look at the number, then go down to the bottom of the EOB after all the claims that are on it are finished. And they should list the remark code. And then it will say, this service is not covered. This claim is improperly coded. We need more information from your doctor. We've requested the medical records. So there's all these different types of reasons. We don't cover the provider of service.
So who can I call? Just like if it doesn't make sense to me, like I can call the insurance company, I can talk to my doctor. Where would
I
I
think
typically?
usually picking up the phone and talking to the insurance company and pinning it down, but you have to be very careful because, again, like we said in an earlier podcast, you don't want to certainly have them launch an appeal just from your phone conversation. And you want to be sure that you say, I'm just asking for information. I just need to help understand my EOB and what this denial reason means. And as a general rule, if they say it's not covered, that's an easy one to check because you've got not covered means the service is excluded inside your policy. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay, great. So I'm going to look at my EOB. I'm going to look at my documents. I'm going to find out the reason. If I have questions about it, I'm going to call the insurance company. And then, of course, I'm not happy about it. I'm not like who goes, oh yeah, okay. So I expected my insurance company to pay and they're not paying and I'm not paying. So we got to figure something out. I've decided I'm going to fight it. Right. So the next step would be,
The next step would be to look at what appeals you've got to do, you know. So again, getting your insurance plan, always having your insurance plan. I've been to conferences where I have 50 people in the room and I say, is there anyone here who has read their insurance policy? And I may get 2 hands out of 50. So it's not something we do, but you should, if you're going to have a lot of medical services, you got something coming up, to me, it would be a really smart idea to get your policy and have it like a Bible. It's there. I know where it is. If something comes up, I can go straight to it. So having your policy is like really, really, really important so that you can refer to it at will as you kind of get to know it and what it says. But if somebody says the service isn't covered, well, every policy has a section that lists all of the exclusions or what's not covered section. And so if they say it's not covered, if you know what service you had, then you go. And some policies have 113 exclusions. So it's always very interesting to go and read every exclusion. And then you begin to understand what your policy covers and doesn't cover. And if you're a hang glider and the policy says we don't cover hang gliding, you would want to know that, right? So you're going to learn some things when you read your exclusions. And it is also helpful if you're going to go get a service that you're not sure is covered to check your exclusions. So if you get a not covered denial, you want to go to your exclusion section and just sort of verify that it's not excluded. Then, if you want to call the insurance company and say, well, what about it wasn't covered? Because not covered is more of a general term. And ERISA, the federal law that we've talked about in earlier podcasts, they have to be specific. So they could say, well, it's not covered because it's experimental. Well, why didn't you say it's experimental?
So
So that call is a little bit important.
yeah. So we're talking about what documents right now, right? What documents you would gather? What information do you need? First of all, you said it's your plan. Now I know
Correct.
if you enroll, like if you're you're with an employer, they're gonna give you a guide, right? That talks in general about, but it doesn't have everything on it, right? There's this plan that doesn't necessarily hit your hands, get in your little possession when you do enrollment. You have to actually sometimes go seek it, go find it online, go ask your HR, go, you know, request it from the insurance company, right? It's just not always just sitting right there in front of you. Correct.
That's correct. And so we can talk about that. If you have an individual policy, it should be on your web portal. So if you bought the insurance policy yourself, you should be able to find it on your web portal. There's a place that says coverages. Now, there's a big difference between the coverage policy and the summary of the benefits. A summary of benefits is only about 7 to 10 pages long. It's kind of like a grid of the coverage, here's the service, surgery, hospital, skilled nursing, and in network, out of network, and it says the percentages they pay. It lists your deductibles. That's not your policy by any means. You need to get the full book. Most policies are about, anywhere from 78 pages to 210, maybe even. I've seen pages that are 500 pages or policies that are 500 pages.
And you
So
want a current one, not like
you,
last year's or 2 years
you
ago.
want a current one that matches the date of the service that got denied. So some large employers don't change their policies every year. They may just do amendments. So if they wrote it in 2021, you want the 2021 book and all amendments that they've added since then, or riders or things that are attached to the policy. So I just did one the other day where we're writing an appeal. Oh, this is a good one. We're going to write an appeal. So it came to me to review, and I was reviewing it with the employee, and the man actually works for Maximus, which is an insurance affiliated business. So I thought it was funny. So I said, Matt, we don't have your full policy. Or I told my employee, we don't have the full policy. We need to get it from Matt. And so I said, okay, well, so it had denied is not covered. And it was a wilderness claim, I believe. And so I open up the plan and there's no exclusion section. So
Excluded,
I'm
right?
like, what the heck? But the insurance company in the denial listed the page number and the number of the exclusion. And I've got this book that doesn't have any exclusion section. So then I dive into the book and I find one page that says, this is not the only book. We also have insurance certificates of coverage. So this book was written by the employer, but then the insurance company had a separate book. So, and then I went further in and there was another section that said, if there's a conflict between this book and the certificate of coverage from the insurance company, the certificate of coverage from the insurance company is the controlling document for the coverage. So now I'm like, okay, I got to go get this certificate because they're listing an exclusion page and an exclusion number. And so I got to see it. So Matt's now setting about the course of getting us the book. And he has an appeal that's due towards the end of September. So I'm like, okay, I got to move this thing along.
Yeah.
So he's working hard to get us the real book.
So
So
what I'm getting out of that is like you think you're going to get what you need, but you got to double check and make sure. Look
yeah,
at the denial reason and make sure that the reason is specifically there, and then make sure you've got the right document. And
yeah,
then
and then
what other documents, would you need to gather getting prepared to fight your medical denial?
well, I always like the summary of benefits. So you want a copy of the front and back of your ID card. You want your policy. You want to make sure it's the right one, and that can take a little digging. Don't let the employer just give you the summary of benefits that's 10 pages, a grid of the coverage. You're like, no, I need the big book, the big one with everything. And the one good thing about booklets is it's about 10 to 12 sections usually. An introduction section, a benefit section, so they list all the benefits. And then there's an exclusion section. Then there's a section about how to pre-authorize your services if you need it. There's a section about how to submit a claim. There's a section about how to appeal your denial. There's a section, a glossary or a definition section, which defines all the terms in the plan. Then there's did I say the exclusion section? Yeah, you want the exclusion section. And then there's a general provision section that sort of goes down everything. There might be a legal section and then federal law section of the federal laws that apply to the plan. So it's a pretty good sized book with 10, 12, 15 sections. And sometimes employers include all the benefits in the book. So if it's just the medical book, it may be this big, but if it's got the disability benefits, the vision, the debt, I mean, it can be a book that's this big, you know? So, and then, so you'll get the whole book, but you'll only end up using a section of it generally to appeal. But yeah, so getting that book is probably one of the most important things you can do to get started.
When you purchase insurance, you have a contract with the insurance company, and that's
That's
the
correct.
contract,
It's a
right?
contract of
Everybody
insurance.
knows contracts have fine print, and
Yes.
this is kind of your fine print, right? This is the stuff that we recommend that you read before you sign up for benefits to make sure that you're covered properly. So
Sure,
good,
and you
good.
do, and a lot of people get scared about, reading their policy. It's really not that difficult, but it can be a little bit confusing, and how they word things or, just the placement of an "and" or an "or" can make a huge difference about coverage and getting coverage. So, you have to be able to have a good eye to look for these things, which is basically what we do. We know how to find the money.
But we also want to challenge everybody that's listening to, if you haven't done it already, to get your plan, read your plan, and then ask questions, right? Call the insurance company and say, I don't understand what this means, and get to know your plan because it's a contract between, it's like what determines what's being reimbursed on your health, you know, take care of
Exactly.
yourself. Yep.
It's exactly. That's you definitely want to be an informed insurance consumer.
I like that. Informed insurance consumer. All right. So what
Absolutely.
else? What else are we putting together for an appeal? We're getting ready. We're kind of gathering the information. What else is necessary to have available for that to write that appeal?
Well, you definitely need a copy of the denial. You want to print your EOB. You probably want to check in with the provider. Depending on the denial reason, you may need medical records. You may need an operative report. And I'm being very general here. You want to, if you find that there's something in the policy that supports it, you want to print those pages and set them aside. So you want to build a little folder. Get your colored folder. That's what we use. Colored folders. And you want to get your documents set somewhere, and then you want to start your investigation. You probably want to write on the label, you know, Dr. Jones, January 5 to March 7, 2024, denial, and then you want to start gathering up your information that pertains to it. And that is always one of the best things to do. And then at least your documents are in order. Documentation in healthcare is the key. If you don't have documents, you will never win. People try to we kill a lot of trees over here at Fix My Claim because the insurance companies have not gone electronic with submitting an appeal. So, when we're submitting 5,000 pages, on a medical necessity appeal, you definitely have to have everything organized. You may want to create a place on your computer where you store it also because you may get lucky. You may be able to send it electronically at some point, but you also want to you're starting to create the roadmap for getting your evidence together. And then you want to make those calls, like we talked about earlier, to the insurance company, not appealing it, obviously, but just checking in with them on what they know about it. and then maybe calling your provider of service, maybe it denied for no pre-authorization. Well, then what goes into my mind is, okay, my provider's contracted with the insurance company. They have a contract too. I have a contract with the insurance company, but the doctor has a contract. So, did the doctor forget to do something which makes me not liable? Because in your policy, it says if the provider's contract, they're responsible to do the pre-authorization, and if they didn't do it, they have to eat it. You
Well,
don't have to pay it.
so first of all, I need you to sit back because you're like really leaning into
Okay.
this. Okay. So when you're talking about, writing an appeal letter, right? You started talking about the contract with the provider and the contract with your insurance company, right? So the provider has an appeal process, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then you have an appeal
The
process.
member appeal
We're going to
process.
talk about your, as a
Correct.
consumer, your appeal. So you can always go back to the provider and they make sure they did their due diligence and coded it right and did all the things because they have a process that they go through. But we know they're either appealing it on our behalf and that's going on and we can appeal ourselves too, or we wait till they're done and then we start our appeal process. Correct?
Right. You're right. So what you want to do is you want to calculate that 180-day time frame and
When
put
is
it on the outside of your folder. That would be the appeal due date.
when is that?
That would be 180 days from the date of that EOB or the date of the letter. We
The,
talked about this the other day.
the
So
day.
you want your drop dead date of when you have to have an appeal into them. And remember that in your head and don't let it escape you ever.
Okay, question for you, because I don't think I've ever asked this. Is it including the date you received it or not including the date you received it? Because, 180 days from today or 180 days from tomorrow. So is it the appeal date plus 180 or is it appeal date included with that 180?
Well, some plans say from the date of the denial, some plans, policies say from the date you received it. So, to be safe, you would always want to use the date on the document. Also, if it's a denial letter or an EOB, at the end of those documents, they should also have that procedure there. But don't ever trust that. You want to go to your plan's appeal procedures and read it. So, there's been times where we've had a letter come that said, you have 180 days to appeal, but we opened up the policy appeal procedure and it said you have 365 days. Well,
What?
what do you do then?
That's a huge
Yes.
difference.
Yes.
Do you,
Or sometimes you've appealed the level 1, you got the level 1 appeal and then the level 2s are shorter. So we'll get discrepancy from what they put in the letter versus what's in the policy. And so that's what I'm saying. You cannot trust an insurance company to give you right information.
now, what if you called them and said, what is my due date for my appeal? What would you have good information that way?
I would never trust them. I would look in my policy.
Okay. So look at
You can
the contract.
generally talk to them about that, but do not rely on that. Remember your policy is the contract of insurance, especially if the one you got is for the same date range of the claims. If the employer sent you a 2022 plan, but your claims in 2023, the 2023 book might have changed, but you don't have it in front of you. So, would you rely on the letter? What would you do? So then you go back and you say, "Hey, Mr. Employer, I need my 2023 book." So it begins to get as muddy as you can almost imagine because you have your policy, you have their denial, you have talking to them, and you have to be the one to ferret out what the due date is. So that is the reason why I'm in business
Well, you want
because
servant too, right? Give
well, you
yourself
want
some
to
time, right?
well, you do have time, but you would be surprised how many people set stuff aside and they get to the last week and then they're in a panic. So you even if the provider's doing something for you, do not go past your due date. Do not. Your drop dead date, don't go past it
Okay.
ever.
Why? Why can't I go?
because you will lose your appeal.
Why?
If you are late, you're done. You'll never get your money.
So you're going to sit down and start writing your appeal. So the first thing is what I'm hearing is dig in there deep, get really into the detail, and figure out what your due date is, and be conservative, right? Like, it's from the date of denial. I mean, at least it's that date, right? And then you got 6 months, 180 days, 6 months, 180 days. 180 days and 6 months don't seem the same to me. But anyway, and then so that's going to decide how long it's going to take you. And then you have to gather all your documents, make sure you have the current documents. And then, this podcast today is really just being super general, right? There's a lot of steps. Every plan has a different appeal process, right? You could have one appeal, you could have two appeals. There's like a lot of things that go into it. But in general, let's talk about, when you start to get ready to write your appeal, what are some of the things that you have to be cognizant of in general, knowing that there's much more to it than generality?
Well, I think and that's a really hard question to answer because this is a general podcast. We're not going into full detail about these things. So you definitely want to make sure that you have the right address. Again, in the letter would be a different address than the EOB versus your policy. And I've had a lot of claims where we relied on the address that was in the policy or on the letter or on the EOB. And insurance companies are famous for not having the correct address. So we get a lot of things going from the post office to them, and we track everything. You don't send anything in to an insurance company without being to track it. So we're checking the tracking, and all of a sudden it's not there. It doesn't arrive there. So we have to go back and look at it, and then we're calling the insurance company. What have you done? Oh, we changed our address 2 years ago. I go, well, it would have been good to change it in your plan and change it on your EOB that was written in 1989 because the little date in the corner. So, sometimes, and we do so many appeals that it's easy for us to sort of, and we keep track of those things, but you as a consumer may not. So, always verify the address where you're sending it to.
Yeah, like
And
call
if you're going to write an appeal, correct. Yeah. If you're gonna write an appeal, you wanna date it. Don't I get so many families who don't put a date on their letter. So, you gotta have a date because that is crucial. Because 'cause they'll give me a letter they sent, and it just says, "Mr. Insurance Company," And I'm like, "When did you send it?" "I don't know." "When did you draft it?" "I don't know." "Okay." So, okay. You
and
know?
tracking, right?
No tracking, no nothing, and I'm like, "Okay, all right." But if I've got a response from the insurance company, most of the time they're gonna say, "We received your appeal on such and such a date."
And
So that gives
they're
me
probably saying that for a particular reason, right? Because that's the
yeah,
response date that
yes.
they're looking at in terms of how when they're supposed to
They'll
respond.
usually say when they received your appeal, but that still doesn't give me the date you drafted it, right? So you gotta just be careful, and then you wanna make sure you put the address. So date, their address after you verified it
Right.
several times,
And it
and then
right,
right? And then you wanna do a regarding area on your letter.
like
Uh,
regarding
this is regarding a level 1 appeal and the patient's name, patient's date of birth, your ID, your policy ID number. Good to have your ID card by you when you write it. Group number, dates of service, the provider name, so that it's all right there in that first little part that you put into your,
you can
letter.
real quick and know exactly.
Everyone knows in business, if you get a letter, there's usually a regarding area, and you want to make sure you have all that. And you want to put the claim number. So you want to go on the EOB and get the claim number. Or if there's a DCN number on the denial letter, you want to put the DCN number in. So when they get it, they'll match it to the DCN number,
What's the DC?
document control number,
Where's that at?
DCN.
What is that?
That's just where they keep their documents. So they store their documents and they number them,
Oh,
sort of like
okay.
their
So
reference
when you
numbers.
see your EOB, it's gonna have a DCN number on it.
No, your letter, your claim your EOB will always have a claim number, right? So you want to make sure you're checking for both of those. And then you want to say, Dear Level 1 Member Appeals, colon. And then you start writing your appeal.
That's on your first appeal is a level 1.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So
So
you want to make sure that
you're just starting out. This is your first appeal. You haven't written more than one, or we don't even know if you have a level 2 available to you in your plan.
yes. And on many podcasts down the road, we'll get into how to write a letter. What do you start with? How do you present the evidence? So it's a little lesson in letter writing, and especially how to formulate an appeal, formulation of the appeal, and getting your thoughts in order is very important.
Hey there, listeners. Enjoying the show so far? Don't miss out on any future episodes. Click the subscribe button now to stay up to date with all our latest insights and tips on navigating insurance claims. Your support helps us bring you this valuable content every week. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show.
So you're going to be, putting in some facts, right? Like what happened when, what, where, when, why, right? Into the letter.
Yes.
So
Yes.
kind of in general, kind of talk about, what things go into a strong appeal letter.
Well, you want to talk about the fact that you receive the denial. You want to say, my son Jonathan was at St. Mark's Hospital between this date and this date. The claim was submitted and you have denied it for this reason.
Mm-hmm. So
And
you facts, right?
You state the facts. And of course, then you probably want to bold it and quote it and put it in the middle what the denial reason was. And then, of course, then you're going to start talking. Let's say the service had been authorized and you got the authorization number from the hospital. You want to say, I don't understand this denial, this pre-authorization denial, because the care was this pre-authorization denial because so-and-so at the hospital for the services, it was authorization number blank. If you can get a copy of the authorization, great. They may have mailed you an authorization letter too. So then you want to check with the doctor. Did they have an authorization letter showing that it was authorized? Did they have a phone call that they made? Okay, let's get that information and get that in there. So you begin to build your evidence to refute their denial, to combat it.
Yeah. Like here's the denial and here's why that denial is not true.
Is not true. Yes. Here's why my claim, and this is why my claim is valid.
This is why my claim is valid is very important to say.
You have to, and you're scolding them while you're doing it. You're giving them a scolding. Like why did you do this? Because this simply can't be because of this, and this.
Claim, and these are the reasons why.
Yes.
Boom, boom.
Absolutely.
Boom. Right.
Boom, boom, boom.
Here's the evidence to show that.
Yes. And then you want to make a copy of the evidence. And then you're going to do footnotes and put in exhibits for your evidence.
Yeah. You're going to say,
and then you want to make an exhibit sheet.
Evidence number 1 is this. Evidence number 2 is this, and state what the document is. So if you have a note from a doctor and it's a letter, they'll be like, well, it is this. And you want to like define what they are.
Yes. You want to define what they are.
Document.
Yes. It's sort of like doing a legal document where you're doing footnotes and you do exhibit 1 and then you explain what it is. If it's dated, you go letter from Dr. Jones or Dr. Jones letter 7/5/24 and you put the date on it, or letter of medical necessity 7/5/24. So you're actually, and then you're going to create an exhibit sheet that will be in front of the exhibit. So the exhibit sheet itself says exhibit 1, and then you put what it is, and behind that you'll put the letter, and it goes at the back of your appeal letter. So it's footnoted, you got an exhibit sheet, and you got the actual exhibit.
So it's to kind of organize it for their readers, right? So that they're
for
not
their readers.
Flip through. You're trying to put it in chronological order or in some kind of rational order that's going to allow the reader, the insurance company, to give no excuses. They didn't understand what you're trying to say. You're trying to be very specific, is what I'm hearing.
Very, very specific. And we take our words very seriously when we write an appeal. I'll say, On a level 2, I may say, "Oh, it appears my appeal has fallen on deaf ears." So, I'm always looking for some, statement that I can make that, someone down the line may go, "Oh, there," I don't want my appeal to fall on deaf ears. I want them to review it. I want them to look at it. I want them to fix the error, the clear error that they made against me and get my claim paid.
Well, I think we're talking about here some of the important things, right? And I'm sure in future podcasts in weeks to come, we can really get into some more kind of like tips and tricks, because when you're talking in general, if this is just let's walk through the workflow of putting one together, right? And how here are some things to make it strong. So the facts, making sure you're referencing you know the claim. I mean, you're sending it to a group that may be reviewing hundreds of claim appeals, so you want to be really specific so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Supporting documents, you said you want to have reference page for each one. Anything else you can think of? And before we,
Well, one thing I do if it's a not covered and it's not in the exclusion section, I do print the entire exclusion section and attach it as an exhibit. Like, okay, go do tell me, Mr. Insurance Company, where this exclusion is, because I just don't see it. And it's attached here for you. If you find it, point it out to me and tell me which number it is.
yeah.
know?
So you're going to want to refer to whatever paragraph that you agree
Yes.
that you believe is the argument against what they're denying, right? So page, or take the page and highlight, right?
Well, I'll give you a quick example. I do have an example that I think is really good. I've got a woman who has a 5-year-old that has autism, and the child was getting therapy in school. So the therapist was going to the school to give the child therapy. The therapist wasn't doing schoolwork. The therapist wasn't teaching them to be in school. She was teaching them and helping them through their autism. And it was ABA therapy. So they covered it for a year. And then all of a sudden, the ABA therapist company wrote a letter asking for more therapy units to be covered for her. And all of a sudden, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois denies it because it's being done in a school. And so I was like, okay, well, that's weird. They've already covered it in the school. The therapist, it's the most convenient place for the family. I mean, the parents work. They're not going to bring a therapist into the home at 6 o'clock at night when they get home. And it's standard that they go there. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois said, oh, we have a guideline. So I look up the guideline, and lo and behold, the guideline for ABA therapy says it only covers it in 3 places. It covers it, and when you bill therapy, it's a place of service. So there's a code that's a place of service code. So it said we cover it in 10 service code 10, service code 11, service code 12. And I said, okay, what are those? So I looked that up, and one was office, one was clinic, and one was outpatient of a hospital. Oh, no. One was outpatient of a hospital clinic, and one was in the home. And so I'm like, that's really weird. So they covered it before, and why all of a sudden is the school setting not the right place? So I pull the policy, and I talked to the mom, and we're panicking because school is starting and she needs them to cover it in order for the child to get through therapy. So at this very day, child's been in school now 3-4 weeks, no therapy being done. I am livid. I am just so upset because this little autistic child is getting no therapy. And I'm like, oh. So I looked in the plan after I talked to her. She'd already sent an appeal herself, and so did the doctor on another round that had been denied, but there was no claim because the child got out of school. So now we're back in school, and they wrote and said, we want to get units from August 24th to February 25th, 2025. And they came back and said it's not covered. So I pulled a plan. I'm like, oh, I hope I find something in the plan. So under the ABA therapy section, in the benefits section of the plan, was a specific statement that said, For ABA therapy, the service location can be done, it can be done anywhere.
In the plan.
Uh-huh. There was no limit on where it could be done. So I called the mom and I go, "Oh my God, you can't believe what I just found." And so I said, we're in, we're in. So we're writing the appeal now. She got me some more medical documentation and letters from the pediatric neurologist and the pediatrician, medical records and stuff. So we can now go in, and we called them today, the insurance, and said, okay, we need this to be an urgent appeal. The child is missing out on services that they absolutely need. So you get that to us now. Well, there was a phone number, of course, it right in the letter, but it was a provider appeal line, not the member appeal line. So we had to go back to customer service, the number on the back of the ID card, and we got a fax number where we can fax the appeal, and we can ask for it to be reviewed urgently, because without this care, the child is backsliding, right? They're not getting their therapy, so they're going to be behind, and they may regress further back than where they were when they stopped therapy before school ended. So this is the kind of thing that is, very frustrating to me, and the mom and I were just beside ourselves. So where if they deny, we should know within 72 hours, because we're asking for an urgent appeal because the child is going without care. And then if they deny, we're going to ship it off to the external outside independent review process and probably get an overturn. But this is just full on bullshit. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. So in talking about the strong appeal, and you were giving a story about, basically being persistent to review it and get the appeal written. What are some of the suggestions and tips on that persistency that you have to have? First of all, you probably could review this is not a process that happens overnight, correct?
That's correct. Gathering up evidence, especially if it's medical necessity, takes a little while. So, most of the doctors we deal with, most of the therapists, they're all quite helpful. They want to know what the issue is so that they can write a decent letter for the family. So, I'm usually able to tell them, guide them what needs to be included in the letter of medical necessity, or if we know what type of evidence we're looking for. So, and it's complicated, but I guess that's why we do what we do, because, we know what needs to be done, and we don't mind helping families because it is so complicated. It's always been complicated. Sometimes it's complicated for me, and I've been doing it for 53 years, so, but usually if you're able to dig in and, and do that investigation piece, with the phone calls and looking at things and gathering up some things, you're going to make some headway. But you do want to, get into the insurance company and probably talk to them. But of course, don't let them ever launch an appeal without making sure you're writing a letter, a standard written appeal. We don't want no phone appeals. They don't help us. They do very little. So you want to, again, act like a little mini lawyer and, start your investigation and then prepare your brief, so to speak.
That gets into our next talking point, right? About persistency
Yes.
with phone calls, emails, keeping log of interactions. Can you kind of explain how you suggest people manage and stay persistent with the process? Because we know it's going to take a while. It's not like you file the appeal and then a month later you're necessarily going to get an overturn.
Well, that's true. You're not necessarily going to get an overturn, but you're going to be calling them. You're going to be checking on it. Every time you talk to them, you write down who you talk to, you write down the date, you write down what transpired, you get the reference number. All of that is definitely information you want to keep, because you're going to be able maybe later to use it against them in the level 1 appeal, the level 2 appeal, or in the external review. Some lawyer may get it down the line, and all of that is so very helpful. Bad faith, sanctions by a Department of Insurance if they're doing things that are inappropriate. So you definitely want to keep your record, have your good record keeping of what you're doing. And I would just get a notepad, and every time you talk to them, you're sitting there on hold a lot, just, write down, the day and So as we're on the phone, we're always typing notes when we're talking to an insurance company called, so typing, if that's good, handwriting, it doesn't matter as long as you've got it. And that's contemporaneous notes, right? So they're recording it, but you want to also make a contemporaneous note so that you can use it against them at a later date if necessary.
Right. So we know it takes a lot of persistence. The one thing I want to touch on is, well, I emailed the appeal to them. Why is it taking so long?
You emailed the appeal in, and why is it taking so long? Well, there you go. Back to
Have
your
to email it.
sometimes on the letter there's an email. There's a few insurance companies that have started allowing them to be emailed. I spoke to the Department of Labor this week and I said to them, "Oh, please, can someone make insurance companies accept electronic appeals because I'm tired of them losing my evidence when they get the appeal." So the people in the mailroom are horrible. I don't know who they hire, but you send, 3,200 pages and you find out when they reviewed your appeal, they only had 900 pages in front of them. And you're like, excuse me? What? So, and of course, so sometimes we check, well, for checking on the appeal, how many pages did you receive? So, oh no, you don't have all the pages. I want to fax these. Where do I fax them? And that happens a lot. So, yeah, if we can get another way to send it, some insurance companies, their fax machines don't take a lot of pages. So, best to do it, I like the US Postal Service and we can get, immediate record of their receipt of it.
Yeah.
And that should go in your file.
But then you're going to recommend some kind of regular follow up after you submit it. Right?
Absolutely.
It's not
usually you
like an automatic response saying we've received it, right? It's like kind of like you send it off into the world, and you're going to have to follow up to find out where you're appealed at, right?
Well, some plans say they're going to send you an acknowledgement letter. Well, we see one out of probably 50 cases where they send an acknowledgement letter, and we're expecting one. The policy says how long they have to respond. So usually within about 10 days after I submit it, 14 days, we call to verify it's on file and it's there. If it's not there, where is it? I have USPS Postal Service showing it was received. Is it, how far behind are you in the mail room? What are you doing in your mail room? People working in there? What's going on? And at that point, if they don't have it, then you may end up reshipping it, but you've got proof that you sent it timely, right? That USPS certificate, it shows, or the fax transmission sheet shows when you sent it, or email, you want the receipt showing they got it. So that's very, very, very important stuff. And then of course, then you want to follow up in about 10-day increments after the first 2 weeks they've got it. Yeah, it's in review. Call them. When can I expect my response? My policy says I should have it in 30 days. What are you doing? Oh, well, we're behind and it's going to be another, we need an extension. And your policy may say that they have to give you notice of that they need an extension. And we hardly ever get those. The insurance companies right now are so far behind in responding to appeals. I hope it's because I'm sending so many.
Yeah, well, it's possible, right? So, and maybe from this podcast, we can support people who want to fight their claims. We've been through a lot of information, and we're not, Fix My Claim is not the only place to go for assistance. There's, healthcare advocates. You've got legal aid. There's government
yeah.
sites.
Well, there's also ombudsman. Some states have an ombudsman. I love ombudsman because they do it for free, but they take forever. That's the problem with an ombudsman. And they're almost too in the weeds, and, you want a fast appeal. So I tend to shy away from the ombudsman unless I'm getting nowhere. Ombudsmen call me if a family has gone through me for the appeal and then they ship it off to the ombudsman. So ombudsmen are pretty good. They're very thorough and they're very good and they're free. So you'd have to check if your state has a healthcare ombudsman.
Yeah. And then the last podcast we talked about of insurance is another opportunity for trying to get things moving along in terms of, things are getting stalled. And then obviously healthcare advocates like ourselves, get the information you need and support you through the process. And then, to follow up at the very end, I know you've talked about it briefly, but, really staying organized and, keeping records and requesting, keeping copies of everything so that you can refer to it back when there's any follow up or second appeal or independent review. Staying organized is also a very important part of this. Do you have any examples, like a story that you could share where, someone that fought a medical claim and what challenge they faced and success they might have had?
Yeah, there's a lot of different cases that we handle, but I did have a woman that went to a plastic surgeon's. She'd had a medical issue and she had lymphedema, which was swelling of the hand, and they wanted to do a bypass of some sort on her, and the insurance company refused. And they had a guideline about when they cover lymphedema, and she fit right into it. So we called the surgeon's office and told them what the guideline said. And I said, "Does the patient meet this guideline?" And they said, "Yes, the patient meets the guideline." So I said, "Could you write me a letter saying that they meet this guideline?" And she did. And so we appealed, proving that the guideline was met with the medical records and the letter, and went piece by piece, into the guideline with the insurance company, and it got overturned. So the woman was very happy because she'd been fighting it herself, and she was having some difficulty because some of it is very complicated, especially if you're getting other documents in that you're not familiar with and how to prove your points. So it's all about the proof, and how do I articulate it well enough to make them see that if they continue to deny, that they will ultimately lose.
Ultimately. But
Ultimately lose.
it's almost like running a marathon. I mean, you spend all the time prepping, you get all the documents together, just like a runner, builds their way up to this event, right? And then it's just like a marathon. You have to have endurance, you have to be prepared to fight, you have to put the time in, you have to have the right strategy. You got, and it takes a lot to reach that final, like note from the insurance company that you won. So
It does. And it's really hard for people, especially when they're trying to live their lives. Doing it as many years as I have, I get frustrated. And my frustration is usually because the insurance company is not doing their job, but it can be one of the most challenging processes you will ever go through. You know, I think having a baby is easier in some cases. it's it just is so trying and so taxing, and you have to put a lot of hours in, and you just don't have the time for it. And so that's why a lot of people seek an advocate or someone that can help them, because it's just not in their wheelhouse. I don't purport to be an electrician. I don't purport to be, a painter or a tax man. If I can't do my own taxes, never have. They're too complicated and I don't know a dang thing about it. So I have a tax man accountant. So you have to be able to pick your battles, and is this the battle I personally want to undertake? You know, and some people are up for the challenge. They are. And some people just call us and they hire us just to give them how to get through it. How do I get through this on my own? And we guide them through it. But some people are just like, oh, I don't have time in my busy life. I just need you, Mary, and your team to take care of this for us.
yeah, so
And
that's why we started this podcast just a couple of weeks ago, right? Is to try to
mhm.
to show people that there's hope, that it's a fight, and helping guide people through the whole process, because you know that's why we're here. And if this episode is helpful to you, visit www.fixmyclaim.com for templates, detailed guides, writing effective appeals, and fighting your medical claim denials. Take control of your claims process, understand, so that you can ensure the care, the health of your family and yourself. If you like today's episode, please hit the subscribe button. We release a new episode every week to help you navigate the world of insurance claims with confidence. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Fix My Claim podcast.
And never give up.
Never give up.
Be sure to visit our website at www.fixmyclaim.com, where you can subscribe to the show on all major audio and video platforms so you'll never miss an episode. If you find value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. For more resources on navigating insurance claims, check out our blog and free guides available on our website. Don't forget to follow us on social media and join our community for ongoing support and updates. Tune in next week for another episode filled with guidance, reassurance, and the knowledge you need to secure the benefits you and your family deserve. Until then, remember, you have the power to fix your claim.